Hello, and welcome to the Digital Digest, your weekly breakfast of insights, tips, and tricks for anyone trying to move things forward in this digital world of accounting. I am joined by Lyndon Stickley today, and we're going to dive into a quote that Lyndon put out on a well-known publication recently that was quite contentious, I would say. He may disagree. He may say that actually this is just normal part of the way we operate. But that quote was that we want to do to Sage what Netflix did to Blockbuster. So, Lyndon, thank you for joining. Give a quick introduction of yourself and why, I guess, or what you meant by that quote.
Hi, Ryan. Yeah, I'm Lyndon Stickley, CEO of Implicit. I've been involved with the gang now for coming up to 9 years, or thereabouts, 8.5 years. And so, what did I mean by that quote? Well, every story needs a villain. And I was being interviewed in person by a publication, and it was one of the quotes I said. But what we're doing is not specifically about Sage, but if I explain what I meant at the time, and that is, every generation, there's a shift in vendors within a marketplace, any marketplace at all. And specifically in the accounting marketplace, the last 30 years have been dominated by a few names that have grown to provide everything across HCM and ERP. And Implicit represents disruption. And so, as Netflix did to Blockbuster. And so what I meant by that quote is that the work that we're doing alongside many other companies that I'll explain in a minute is, I believe, the undoing of the incumbents. And therefore, what Netflix did to Blockbuster was unseat a dominant, all-powerful providing service that had just blatantly grown old and bloaty and complacent. And interestingly, I noticed, I think it was Phil Hobden in your comments said, well, actually, Netflix didn't do this to Blockbuster. Blockbuster did it to themselves. And I think there's a lot of merit in that, which is, what are we doing to be the undoing of, say, Sage? But it's not just Sage. It could equally as apply to Advanced, Access, and Iris in many counts. I just use Sage as the example because it's the most dominant in the marketplace, and it's where half of our business comes from. But our disruption is unseating the old guard and enabling the new to flow in.
Yeah, and I think in a way it's a compliment to Sage because it shows how big they are. It shows how much of an impact they have had in the space for so many years. And through their own admission, they've said that they were slow to the cloud journey. They're building out their products, they're trying to evolve them, but they were similar, I guess, to Blockbuster early on, which they said this is a fad. This isn't something we necessarily need to throw our weight behind. And I guess as those that were showing, I guess, as competitors, they were growing in size. They went, okay, we need to try and react. And they are doing that. But I guess talk a little bit more about what you mean by what you're doing to disrupt. Like, I love, obviously, disruption in this market. We have an entire brand about being that and advocating for that and helping those that are changing and pushing the needle. But what is Implicit doing then to disrupt?
Well, let's start with looking at the terrain. What you've got with the incumbents, the majority of them have a vast investment in legacy tech. A majority of their income comes from legacy tech. Many dress it up to be annual recurring revenue when the reality is you're talking about support subscriptions and therefore for legacy tech. So you need to be careful about how you read people's migrations to ARR, because if it's not SaaS ARR and it's not actual service, then the reality is if it's support for old systems, that's still revenue that's going to die. And the majority of the market, as it stands today in the mid-market, is effectively based on legacy tech. And the way we segment the market is you can look at the top and the bottom being serviced very well by the likes of NetSuite and Xero, respectively. 23 years ago or so, NetSuite came in and put everyone on notice. It punched Sage in the face. It put Microsoft on notice, along with SAP and Oracle. And 15 years or so ago, Xero came in and did the same thing, but for Mind Your Own Business and Sage 50 and QuickBooks. And what it did is it left an orphaned mid-market. Those businesses or organizations that are too big for Xero and QuickBooks, and they're not really of the size that they can stomach the disruption or the costs associated with something like NetSuite or Dynamics. That's the market we're disrupting. We're disrupting about 100,000 organizations that have been left orphaned with legacy tech that actually isn't being served appropriately. And you mentioned that others are now coming to the game and they're getting their act together and they're building. That's not quite true. Many of the incumbents aren't building at all, they're buying. And therefore, the propositions that they've got to market are being bought in and consumed in. And equally, they're not all born in the cloud propositions or latest cloud gen software. And so the disruption that we offer is this: we bring born in the cloud, pure play, mid market accounting into that orphan space. And the thing that's really, I think, frightening for the incumbents, it's not iplicit alone that's going to be the toppling of Sage. How could we be? We don't do HR, stock, CRM, payroll, construction, and so on. The all encompassing brands like Sage and Advanced and others that and Access that offer complete ecosystems. How could we possibly be their downfall? Well, the reason is because we're best of breed core finance. And once you put a best of breed core finance into an organization with an open API, we actually then have the ability to bring in best of breed HR, payroll, stock, CRM, whatever you need. And so I think that what's really happening here is we're rescuing the FDs and the CFOs in the finance departments that have historically been held hostage to legacy tech and lock-in multi-year contracts. But once that has been adopted, we open the door for everything else to come in and connect with us and displace what is historically for the last 30 years been quite a closed ecosystem from each vendor.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good summary of what's happened, I guess, over the last decade or so. And you picked, the probably the biggest players that have done that and come in and disrupted it and put yourself in that central space to disrupt and make a big impact. And I don't think that's necessarily wrong. And the timing is interesting. The fact that you had the top player, the bottom player, and now the mid tier is the one that's probably a bit behind, a bit later compared to the others. And also, it's interesting, I guess, on how you view this model, in that it's similar to what Xero did, as in they focused especially on their niche and then built the ecosystem around them that enabled them to focus on what they were specifically good at. And I assume then that that's exactly iplicit's model. And do you think that will stay as iplicit's model? Because the tendency is that you're going to always build out over time and build out functionality and then evolve into a much bigger ERP. Do you feel that that's where players in that mid-tier space should go? And is that where you'd go?
I think it's a blend. We often get referred to as the Xero of the mid-market because we're the next tier up, and we're doing exactly what Xero did from the disruption. We're taking charge of the accountant channel. By the end of next year, we should have 25 of the top 50 practices as accredited iplicit implementation partners. We're taking resellers with us as well, from whether it's NetSuite, Sage, or Advanced. And we are going with a strong direct team at the moment as well. Yes, we will expand our product. We're quite unique, and we've got onshore development. Most people in this space don't have onshore development. Now, why is that an issue? Well, the primary issue is our focus is UK and Ireland. Everything we do is for UK and Ireland. So if you look over the last, say, 4 years, we'll have had 300 upgrades up in functionality within our system, and 100% of them will have been for UK and Ireland. A competitor may well have 300 changes in that period of time, and maybe 20 are for the UK. And so we will expand the product out, but we're not a company that's setting sights on becoming full ERP by any means. We actually believe that we're looking for an organic growth model to focus entirely on core finance with expanding functionality around it, like we have APA and fixed assets and project costing and the like. So we do have modules within the system. But no, we're not going to be expanding into payroll or CRM or stock and the like, and therefore, or HR systems. Therefore, we open with a vehicle effectively for bringing those best of breeds into customers that have previously they've been locked out of.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the challenge to me is that you're UK focused now, and every business starts in a jurisdiction. But your growth curve will move you into other restrictions, other geographies. That's natural because you need to grow, you need to keep scaling. And when that happens, do you feel that your focus will shift, that your resource, because there's always a defined pool of resource that you can never put towards development. Do you think that will shift then to other jurisdictions?
I wouldn't take the premise that it's obvious that we're going to expand into international waters. It's on our roadmap and it's something we're considering. But let's look at why we haven't to date and why we're focusing on the UK market alone for at least another 2 years. And we've been in this market now 6 years. We're in our seventh year, and we're continuing to double and triple down on the UK and Ireland. Why is that? There's 100,000 sites that we think aren't being serviced correctly and are stuck on legacy tech. That's a 2 billion ARR market if you target them as an average of 20K a year average contract value. 2 billion ARR, and we have the best tech in the market, the best team by miles, and right now the best trajectory. We're outselling everyone else significantly. So I think we'd have eyes bigger than our stomach if we start looking at foreign markets when right now in front of us, one of our significant investors who's one of the gods of Europe in the B2B finance space, he suggests that we should be taking a 500 million a year revenue from this market. And therefore, why on earth would we look anywhere else before we've made a material dent into that? Now, we do have demands internationally. We do have some sites internationally already. We've got sites in Canada, America, Australia, and New Zealand. But the focus is entirely right now, the momentum and the push is all about UK and Ireland, and will continue to be until we've reached a critical point. And that critical point will be the tipping point where we become the de facto standard. We want to have the market understand that if you're on Sage 50 or 200 or Pegasus, Exchequer, Access, SAP Business One, if you're on those systems and you're stuck with legacy tech and you need to look at cloud, you can't afford the disruption or the cost of the larger systems, we want Implicit to be the first name that's rolls off their tongue. At that point, when there's a tipping point and there's a momentum that's unstoppable in the UK, that would be the time that we could then entertain actually the expansion into other English speaking territories. Now, you'd be right in thinking, so if you go to America, you're going to have a problem because all of your guys are in the UK and then the focus on the UK. You'd be dead right. We're absolutely dining out right now. Like the Intact development team, entirely US based, as is, I understand, Dynamics. And so ex-Ledger's team, Scandinavia. So when you look at our focus with 38 engineers on UK soil, all focusing on UK requirements, that's a key differentiator in our market and one that we're going to leverage for as long as we can.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And obviously, anyone that's in the UK is going to love to hear that because,
Yep.
not that we're just focused in this country. We're not insular. We're quite open-minded and like working with many parties. But we do know the focus is on what we need, and every jurisdiction is niche in the way they operate. But let's go back to the quote that you said about replacing Sage or doing what Netflix did to Blockbuster with Sage. That really comes back to, as you said at the start, moving the needle, changing the dynamic. The subscription model has changed, and as you inferred, that although on an ARR perspective, that any shift from the way revenue is brought in, and they, if we go back to Sage, we know they have shifted their model to a regular recurring monthly income. That hides actually the transition to cloud. But something that Implicit have very much been doing is growing at an incredible rate, and you've been showing that with your listings as one of the fastest growing UK businesses. Can you just remind anyone that's watching what you've achieved with that? Because there's been some remarkable statistics you've hit.
Yeah, we've been FT 1000 in each of the last 2 years, and Deloitte Fast 50. And on the FT list, we were the 18th fastest growing company last year in the UK. And on the Deloitte list, which came out later because the growth gets harder and harder to keep maintaining, the Deloitte figures were a year on, and we were the 40th fastest growing company in the UK. And we've grown year on year since launch over 100% every year. And so this is our 7th year that we're going for another double. And so in 2019, we put our first user on the system, and we're now 38,000 users a day. And that's probably out of date because I've said that for the last 3 or 4 weeks. So the reality is we're growing very rapidly, and yet we're scratching the surface. Our intel tells us that we're outselling everyone by a country mile. We think the closest mid-market accounting platform in the UK sold half of what we sold last year. And this year we're looking to double again. And our intel's pretty good. We've taken staff from, NetSuite and Advanced, and I've had 25, 26 interviews with Sage staff in the last 12 months, and we've taken 13 now. So, we understand the market well, and we recognize we're in a very, very fortunate position. But it's, there's a lot of luck that's behind what we've done. There's a ton of hard work. There's a ton of investment. There's 43 million pounds behind us now in investment. But there's been a ton of luck. At the very start, there was a number of sixes rolled that you couldn't make up. From how the tech was born, how I found the tech, married it with how I randomly knew the original Exchequer guys, how COVID happened, which, in many ways wasn't a good thing, but for SaaS tech companies was a game changer. There's so many things that have happened along this journey to lead us to the point now that we're an entirely remote first company. I've got 153 staff, and 135 of them are working from home. And that is an absolute game changer, which again, if you look at like the Netflixes to Blockbuster or the digital to Kodak type model, and you look at how the old guard is based on an old model and it's making tons of money on that old model. Sage is making tons of money on Sage 50 support contracts. Like it's like Blockbuster's late fees. But what the problem is when you're worried about share price, and bear in mind, we don't worry about share price. We don't have a share price to worry about. So we worry about, we're a people first company. So my primary worry every single day is staff. I get the staff right, everything else happens. But the first thing we worry about is staff. The second thing we worry about is customers and customer centricity. Our competitors are worried about share price. That's the nature. That's not a dig at any of the vendors in particular. That's the nature of corporations. That's the nature of how big they get and how quarter by quarter they're driven for their bonuses and for their performance that they have to achieve. Otherwise, they don't stay in position. So disruptors naturally come in and they naturally upend the status quo because they don't have the same drivers. And we can come in and we can be quite cavalier. And I think the biggest area we can be cavalier, which is a real game changer for us or for the market, but we're starting this game change, is we're starting a movement when it comes to what we think is acceptable in the market as the way you offer proposition to customers. So we say no multi-year lock-in contracts. That's not a thing. You can leave when you like with us. And we say guaranteed ceiling on price rises for the duration of the relationship, not the contract, for the relationship, however long it is. And no one does that. And so we want to change the dial. So if nothing else, in the next 5 to 10 years, we won't take the whole market, obviously, but we intend to take a good chunk. But along the way, we'll force the others, whether they be new entrants, whether they be incumbents, we'll force the others to have better behavior and more customer centricity. Because right now, again, without any particular dig at any particular vendor, they're all rinsing their customers for what they can get because the customers are stuck. And that's something that shouldn't happen, and it's why change occurs. And that's why Blockbuster fell apart, because what were its primary drivers? Real estate appreciation and late fees. What was at the heart of what the customers wanted? Neither of those two things.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just a business life cycle to some extent, right? You grow, you can be dynamic, you can disrupt. You, as you said, not helped by the same metrics, but as soon as you get to a certain size, those change and those requirements change, and then it's all about profitability. And let's not hide, if iplicit get to that size and get that big, that will happen. That's natural, and I guess how they work with their customers will need to change. But as we go back to it, you can work in a different way now, and you can have an impact on the way the business community works in that mid-tier finance space. And what I really would like to understand, I guess, from you, Lyndon, is we've talked about the disruption, the things you do to enable you to consistently grow at such a large or big pace, to be listed in, as one of the fastest growing businesses. And that obviously means that you are doing something right and you're doing something consistently right. So what do you think it is at iplicit that is that stands out, that makes those people sign up and gets you at that growth sale and stay with you so you've not got the churn?
Yep. I think there's two things that come to mind. There's probably 20 that we do, and we put a lot of time into it. But there's two things that really stick out. We have brilliant tech, and there's no getting away from it. Everyone wants to be around brilliant tech, whether you're a salesperson, a service person, an engineer. You want to be involved with something that's going to win. And winning is addictive for all levels. You don't have to be a salesperson to want to be addicted and be on the winning team. So having great tech is at the heart of what we do. And the reason we've got great tech is, again, a lot of luck underlying that, a lot of a madman at the heart of it who was borderline bonkers, but now in hindsight was genius because he didn't go bust in the process of what he did. But if he'd gone bust, he'd have been bonkers. But great tech is the first thing. But the second thing is people first. It's all about people. Most other CEOs or people I talk to, they can't understand or they don't believe how much I talk to staff and invest in staff and our people first. There's a lot of CEOs do things differently to me in terms of they might be more finance based, they might be more strategically based, and they're working on a whole ton of other things. I've got a really good team around me for finance, for strategy, and so on. I spend most of my time focusing on staff morale, staff opportunities, staff growth, having a people-first organization. And there's something Richard Branson said, and I'm not a big fan of Richard Branson. I think he's all right. I don't follow his every move. I used to like him more than I do these days. But I remember him saying one thing that really stuck in my mind a long time ago, which is customers aren't first. It's not the customer's not first. The staff is first. You look after your staff, and then the customers get looked after by them. And I truly believe that. And so one thing that I think's made us really able to do what we do well is the product of lockdown and remote working. We couldn't have achieved anything anywhere near what we've achieved with just great product if I couldn't have recruited talent anywhere. And that means that not only can I grow much faster by recruiting talent anywhere, but I can recruit talent where the talent wants to be. So I don't have to say, hey, I found you and I want to employ you, but can I move you to the geography of the office? We don't have an office that's going to be a return to work to. There's a small office for support and marketing down in the south, but we don't have a corporate HQ. And so that's the fundamental shift. The rapidity in which we could grow has been facilitated by recruiting talent anywhere. And the morale and the retention and the way we keep staff is based on the fact that, like yesterday, I can give an example. I can't give a name because he hasn't accepted yet. But I've made an offer yesterday to a fantastic Intact solutions consultant. He's going to hopefully join us in the next 4 weeks. I can't even remember where he's based. Now, I've been involved with the interview
US.
process. Right. Now, he's in the UK. He's in the UK. But the bottom line is, I can't remember where he's based. And it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. We get together every 3 months as teams. Our departments get together. We party hard. We have a lot of fun. But everything we do is remote. And we also recruit mature people. And when I say that, I don't mean excessively, but we only really recruit people with a track record. We recruit people that are, effectively, they've done this before. They know what they're doing. They've had their office time. They have now got bored with the office. They don't need Friday pizzas and after-work beers. What they really want is they want to be able to walk the dog, put their kids to bed, and still do a 10-hour day. And that 10 hours comes out of the hours they would have done on the commute, which means they feel like they've got their life back and yet they can still smash their job. And I think that's a real key. The people that the incumbents that we're competing with in the legacy tech, they've all got tons of staff and tons of office space and return to office policies, which is counterculture now. And so I've taken staff because the vendors are saying, you've got to come back to the office 3 days a week for no good reason. But that's our new policy. And yep, you might be trustworthy at home. And yep, you might be enjoying your job and hitting your targets. But our policy is now back to work. I've got sympathy with why. I do get it. I'm not saying they're wrong, because if I had 3,000 staff, I'd probably be saying the same thing. But I've recruited a cause, basically. I've recruited for a cause. And we've got 153 passionate, cause-led people that don't need to be in an office to be motivated.
Yeah, and the benefit is that if they are around the country, then you can obviously support your customers that are around the country. So if you're UK-centric, UK-focused, and you're spread out, actually that can be a big benefit in itself. And there is so many positive things that you said about working with the people and that impact, because that's something that I've always found working with Implicit is you get that constant feel of support no matter what the issue is, no matter what you're trying to achieve. And that means that that's flowing all from yourself down, Lyndon, through your staff and out into your customers, your consultants, anyone that you essentially are engaging with. And there's a few other things I guess I'd want to touch on. I think one is that you've managed to get the balance right, in my opinion, between a off-the-shelf system and customization, because the system you've got is complex enough to be able to tailor it a lot to what the customer needs, but not so customizable that it breaks down if you need to integrate or create such a cost-heavy implementation process. You can turn it around quickly. You can bring in historical data in a relatively flexible way, and it means you can roll out a system and then evolve that system over time inside a business. And that's something I like. But there is something that I do need to point out that I think harks back to maybe the old days, and that's the first time you actually you look at iPlicit is you go, Jesus, this feels old. And I think that the UI is something that is probably the most dated out of every part of your system. And I know that's something that you're aware of and you're working on. I'm sure we're going to hear about, and you may be able to give us a sneak peek of that, Linda, because I know that's something you're very passionate about changing. But how successful you've been when the first impression people get is go, geez, this feels like from the 1990s, shows the power of the technology underneath, because it shows that once they actually get to see it, they're like, whoa, I don't care about what this feels like, what this looks like, but the navigation, the way I can interact, the power I can do overrides that to another extent. Is that, I guess, do you think that's a realistic assessment of the system as it is?
I'd say I agree with you to some extent. I don't think all customers agree with you. I've had plenty of people say we looked at Sage 200 and we looked at you, and Sage 200 was like going back in the dark ages.
I mean, that's even older, to be fair.
Exactly. But you're right. If you look at, say, Zero and some of the entry level stuff, of course, Zero's beautiful accounting software. We're powerful accounting software, and there's a reason for that. But you're absolutely right. Where does iPlicit really stand out? It's rapid deployment, it's super intuitive interface, and the ability that once you know one or two screens, you know them all. And so, and you're absolutely right. It was built by heavy techs that had been 23 years in the space for implementation for Aggresso, SAP, and Oracle. So we got this system out of a very deep tech space where their primary focus was intuitive interface and ease of use and making the complex simple, which is what you pointed out. Now what we're doing is we've run with that for 6 years. We've got the base, we've got the trajectory, and we've now expanded, and we've now got UX, UI designers, front end, back end. We've got an increasing product department, and you're absolutely right. There's going to be some killer evolution that's happening from the UX, UI perspective, and also from the functionality, and that's all evolving. But to start with, what we wanted to do is we wanted to solve the problem. And the problem was you need remote working, you need cloud connectivity with other applications across your business, and your legacy tech doesn't give it to you. Your on-premises solution physically prevents you or gives you security and speed headaches if you try and do any integration with cloud apps or with remote working facilities. And so we solved the problem, which is you're stuck, Mr. Sage 50 customer or Mr. SAP Business One or Pegasus or Exchequer. You're stuck. Your vendor isn't offering you anything that's acceptable. They're either offering you nothing or it's overly engineered, way too heavy and expensive. And we can give you a migration path to something that's really easy to use, and we can be in and out inside 20 days. And that's a good example as well. When we win against NetSuite, we could go into an opportunity where we're shoulder to shoulder with NetSuite on a services proposition, and NetSuite will be 120 days implementation, and we'll be 20. We'll save the customer 100 grand in the first year by giving them a system, and it's more intuitive, and it will scale with them, and they don't need the heavier firepower. And that's the reality. There's the top guys are trying to come down and serve that mid-market gap that they've forgotten, and it doesn't work because it's over-engineered. The bottom guys are trying to come up with the app stacks and the extra facility, but it doesn't really work if you want multi-legal entity and consolidation and real-time MI. And so there's that mid-market unserved gap. And by luck, I found a killer app that effectively was built by an engineering team that had been 23 years implementing large-scale ERP and felt they could do it better themselves. A bonkers idea to start out with no customers, no heritage. They just felt they could do it better themselves. Absolutely insanity. But guess what? Turns out they could.
Yeah, and everything starts from idea. And as you said, an idea plus luck generally leads to success, right? And there's lots we've talked about. You're incredibly passionate about this, Lyndon, and obviously you're going to be very biased towards the iPlicit system because it is something that you have helped grow and continues to grow. There are others in this space, those that are, competing against you, those that are cloud native, those that offer a different kind of approach. But going back, I guess, to the quote, going back to your reference to Sage and the whole thing about Netflix replacing it and that reference to Blockbuster. The one difference I do see with Sage is they are trying to do something. They are trying to evolve. They're trying to change. how they operate. They are bound, as you said, by other restrictions, be those financial metrics and things that they are held by.
And
But at
an
least
American
trying to do
development
something,
team.
and that. But they are at least trying to do something, and that may mean that they do evolve, they do succeed, they do still become a big player in the cloud native department. We all yet to see, but I think we are, and definitely I am certain that iPlicit will be a big player. They will continue to grow, and yeah, it's interesting to see how passionate you are, Linda, about disrupting, about changing the needle, and about changing how the dynamic works in the mid-tier space. So thank you so much for coming on, talking through and explaining what that quote meant. I think hopefully anyone that watches this will now have a better understanding of what you meant by it.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks very much.